she was also furious about the whole surrogacy business and all of the speculation and all of the antics surrounding that. She thought the whole thing stank to high heaven, but there was nothing, but her hands were tied, not only legally, but morally.
Developing today, new details about the late Queen's hatred of Meghan Markle and how palace insiders view the final betrayal by her grandson, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. Of course, the woman who has been across this story before anyone else is Lady Colin Campbell. We're going to be with her on this in just one moment. But first, I wanted to take you through some of these astonishing insider revelations. I mean, the Daily Beast and Tom Sykes, the European editor-at-large, put it this way. Insiders are just now unloading on Prince Harry's betrayal of Queen Elizabeth. This, of course, is as a result of those astonishing beyond the grave revelations by Lady Elizabeth Anson, revealed by the royal biographer Sally Beadle-Smith on her Substack. But I'm delighted now, and actually before I get to some of these specific, really damning quotes from people who are close to the late Queen, Lady C, can we just set this up from a macro point of view? Isn't it wonderful? Okay, yes, it has taken 7 years, but isn't it wonderful that allies of the late Queen are finally feeling empowered enough and like the mainstream media has changed enough that they can start talking up the actual horror and disgust at the way that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle treated the late Queen in her dying months and years?
Yes, I think it's wonderful. And I knew Elizabeth Anson slightly. I have to say she wasn't my favorite person. I didn't dislike her, but I didn't like her. And one of my former flatmates used to work with her. So, but there's no doubt that she was very properly connected. She was the Queen's first cousin once removed. She wasn't the Queen's first cousin, as the media keep on saying. That was her mother, Anne Boleyn, who became Princess George of Denmark and was known as Princess Anne of Denmark. But Eliza Anson was a good friend of the Queen's. More so after Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother died, because until really Princess Margaret died, Princess Margaret filled that role. But her brother's wife, who was the Duke of Westminster's sister, was also a lady in waiting of Princess Margaret. So it was all very cozy and well connected, and she certainly knew what was going on. And I know some of the people that Sally Biddell-Smith is now quoting. For instance, Elsa Boker, whom she calls Lady Elsa Boker. She wasn't Lady Elsa Boker. She was Lady Boker. She was the wife of a knight. And Elsa, who I'd known forever because she was half Egyptian, half Lebanese, and part Lebanese. So through the Lebanese community, we'd known each other for decades. And also she was a great friend of my stepmother-in-law, Margaret, Duchess of Argyll. And Elsa has said various things as well, which she said to me. So everything that actually Sally Biddell-Smith is saying that Elsa said is absolutely accurate. One or two of them were so hot that I didn't put them in my book, The Real Diana. But where Eliza is concerned, it was she would spill the beans to Sally Biddell-Smith. Thank God she did, because otherwise I was going to a large extent be a lone voice. Now I'm not a lone voice. And when I said certain things, people said, oh, no, Lady Colin Campbell has a blah, 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 blah. And everything I always have said actually always turns out to be true. But that doesn't stop the mainstream media from trying to denigrate what I say. But now that Sally Bedell-Smith is saying it through another source, who is a cousin of the late Queen and a friend of the late Queen, it's very variable. And the Queen was absolutely, as I indicated in my book, the Queen was, and remember, when I wrote the first version of my book, the Queen was still alive.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here on Outspoken, please consider joining our thriving community over on Substack, www.outspoken.live. You can sign up completely for free, but Substack is so important to me. It is a free speech platform. It protects me from big tech cancellation. Plus, you get to communicate directly with me. Head on over www.outspoken.live, enter your email address, and sign up today.
And I made it absolutely clear that the Queen was outraged. I had to clean up certain things to protect the identities of people. For instance, I mentioned the Queen driving someone on the Windsor estate in the Christmas, in the run-up to the Christmas season, in the run-up to Megxit. And the Queen was vitriolic about Meghan. She thought that she was, and I can't use the words, but let me put it this way. If you like jam tarts, and if you like things about the street, and if you like, the Queen was devastatingly pejorative about Meghan as an individual and as a character. And I had to clean it up for legal reasons in my book. But the Queen saw through Meghan. The Queen was absolutely furious with Meghan. And the Queen, at that Christmas, before Meghan had actually had the unmitigated gall to say that the Queen doesn't own the word royal. And the Queen could not believe that she had given this girl, this scrubber with the most appalling reputation, that she had given her an opportunity. And she had believed that because Meghan had allowed her to believe that she wanted to join the team and work as a royal and do good as a royal. And she felt utterly betrayed that she had been manipulated the way she had by Meghan. And she also felt betrayed that Harry had been manipulated and that Harry had voluntarily jumped on the bandwagon and slit the Queen's throat.
Indeed. Lady C, how are you suggesting that the late Queen thought Meghan Markle was a bit of a tart?
Was a what?
Bit of a tart.
I don't remember how I cleaned it up in the book because I had to clean it up for legal reasons. I don't remember the right. I'd have to look at, because we had to change the wording. But yes, the Queen thought that Meghan was an operator who used her attributes and had used them very successfully where Harry was concerned, and where other men were concerned as well. I mean, the Queen knew that Meghan had been around the block several times. I mean, do you remember the Queen's expression during that wedding ceremony? I mean, thunder would have been more lightweight than the Queen's expression. Yeah, she thought she knew what Meghan was, and she was privately, and I need to skirt around these issues, Jan, to protect you as well, because for legal reasons, the Queen knew exactly what Meghan was, and by the time of Megxit, she had a large part of her measure, and after Megxit, she had an even larger part of her measure. And by the time the Queen died, she knew exactly what she was dealing with. She was horrified by the Oprah interview, but she was also horrified by the total callousness that both Harry and Meghan showed in saying that they believed that the that the royal family was allowing Prince Philip to fake his obvious demise, so to keep them from broadcasting that show. I mean, can you imagine how betrayed she felt? I mean, this was a grandson that she had loved and done. Oh, and by the way, also one of the things she also objected to, I understand, is the lies that Harry and Meghan were broadcasting through their agents, that they had unlimited and perpetual access to her, and that they would be
Yes.
phoning her up and zooming her and the children and all the rest. It's all of that was absolutely, according to people the Queen told, totally untrue. They were simply abusing their relationship with her, and she knew it. Why do you think she absolutely refused to have any photographs of herself with that child, Lily, or any other photographs of herself with Archie? There are no photographs of the Queen. And she was also furious about the whole surrogacy business and all of the speculation and all of the antics surrounding that. She thought the whole thing stank to high heaven, but there was nothing, but her hands were tied, not only legally, but morally. Let's remember the Queen was the supreme governor of the Church of England. She was not only a queen, she also had a religious role to fulfill, and she was a devout Christian. But she, don't think for 1 second she didn't bitterly, and the word is bitterly, resent the way she and her position were being abused by Harry and Meghan.
Absolutely. Very, very, very powerfully put, Lady C. And I think the fact that there was never a picture of her with her so-called namesake is something that will haunt Prince Harry and Meghan Markle forever, because it just proves what these insiders were all telling you. Now, let me go through what these new courtiers and friends have told Tom Sykes in the Daily Beast. He's the European editor-at-large, very well-connected man. One source, a former courtier, told the Daily Beast, ultimately the Queen felt betrayed by Harry. And when he and Meghan attacked the institution that she spent her whole life serving in the Oprah interview, that betrayal was complete. It was absolutely shocking to those of us that knew him that he would do that, not least because her husband was on his deathbed. The former staffer told the Royalist, the allegations of racism dismayed the Queen. To accuse an unidentified person within the family of racism, thereby casting the shadow of suspicion over everyone, was unforgivable in her eyes. That was what ultimately prompted her to issue the recollections may vary statement. Things were never the same after that. It was a horrific series of betrayals at the end of her life. Another friend of the royals told the Daily Beast, you have to remember that the Queen was seriously ill for several years with bone cancer. She knew she was dying. She could hardly see. She could hardly stand. She could hardly move. And then she was completely let down by her grandson. It was utterly devastating for her. And a friend of Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, told the Daily Beast, the family, of course, all blame Meghan 100%. As Sally Biddle-Smith's column made clear, he ain't the sharpest tool in the box, and they feel he was completely manipulated and that Meghan saw him and realized she could become the most famous person in the world. Then the reality of what their boring royal life would be like sunk in, and she decided to ruthlessly milk it for all it was worth. That is their view. The friend of William and Catherine added, the family think it is a rerun of what happened with Wallace Simpson, and the only solution is to follow the same playbook. Exile worked before, and it will work again. So, Lady C, lots of fascinating things to pick up on there. But the first thing I just want to ask you about is this friend of the late Queen. And I think it was stark the way that they describe exactly how difficult it was for the late Queen in her dying days. Now, of course, we knew how much she was suffering at the time. We all wanted to respect the fact that she didn't want the public to know just how bad her cancer was, just how bad her eyesight was, just how bad her walking was. You know, she didn't want people to see her that way. But the fact that friends of the royals are now coming out and saying that was her reality paints a very, very stark picture of just how revolting what Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were putting her through really was.
Yes, well, Dan, I'm sure you know that Tom Sykes is a friend of mine.
Yes,
His
very,
father
very
is a
connected
friend
guy, isn't he?
He's very well connected. The Sykes are one of the great aristocratic English families, and his father used to spend every weekend down here with me after he was widowed. And I know how well connected he is, and everything. And Tom is absolutely reliable and trustworthy. And everything that he is now saying, of course, is a variation of what I've been saying all along, because I have, although I don't ask him for his sources and he doesn't ask me for mine, it is possible that if they're not crossovers, there are certainly, they're all from the same world, let's put it this way, from the royal world and the aristocratic world, where people have been talking for some considerable length of time. And the Queen made her sentiments very clear to very many people. And I am delighted that it's all coming out now. But it was never going to come out before now, because notice the timing. The timing of all of this is following the Hollywood Reporter and the Vanity Fair exposés. Until certain people regarded it as safe, they were perfectly prepared to have me being a lone wolf in the wilderness with you and one or two other people saying this. But they were not prepared to back it up until they knew that the tide had turned and that Meghan and Harry were being exposed for the traitors, the treacherous, really rather cruel and nasty people that they have shown themselves to be. So let's be quite clear about why it's happening now, but it is.
For years, many royal watchers have argued that the public has only seen part of the story when it comes to the breakdown of relations between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the rest of the royal family. Now, a new wave of reported accounts from royal insiders and individuals said to have been close to Queen Elizabeth II has reignited one of the biggest debates in modern royal history. According to recent reports and commentary from several royal observers, a picture is emerging of a monarch who may have felt deeply disappointed by how events unfolded during the final years of her life. If you enjoy royal analysis, history, and commentary, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. For years, commentators who questioned Harry and Meghan's version of events often found themselves dismissed or ignored by much of the mainstream media. But according to some royal analysts, that environment appears to be changing. A number of writers and commentators now argue that people who remained silent while Queen Elizabeth was alive may finally feel comfortable sharing what they believe she really thought about the events surrounding Megxit, the Oprah interview, and the ongoing public criticism of the monarchy. The central claim being discussed is simple but powerful, that Queen Elizabeth felt betrayed. It is important to remember that the Queen was famously private. She rarely expressed strong public opinions, and she carefully protected the institution she spent her life serving. Yet, according to these accounts, behind closed doors, she was far more upset than the public ever realized. Several commentators have argued that the Queen initially welcomed Meghan into the family and genuinely hoped she would become a successful working royal. From this perspective, the disappointment was not simply about Harry and Meghan stepping away from royal duties. Rather, it was about everything that happened afterward. Critics point to the series of interviews, documentaries, books, and public statements that followed their departure. In particular, many royal observers continue to focus on the Oprah interview, which became one of the defining moments in the relationship between the Sussexes and the monarchy. Supporters of the royal family argue that the interview placed enormous pressure on an institution already dealing with major challenges. At the time, Prince Philip's health was deteriorating, and the Queen herself was entering the final chapter of her life. According to commentators who have discussed recent insider accounts, this timing remains one of the most painful aspects of the entire saga. They argue that while family disagreements happen everywhere, the public nature of these disputes made them especially difficult. Another theme that repeatedly emerges from these discussions is trust. Many royal commentators believe that trust between the Sussexes and the wider royal family broke down completely during this period. According to reports cited by royal analysts, there was growing frustration within royal circles over media stories suggesting that Harry and Meghan maintained a particularly close and ongoing relationship with the Queen. Some commentators claim that palace insiders believed these stories created a misleading impression of the Queen's actual position. Whether those claims are accurate or not, they continue to fuel debate among royal watchers. The broader argument being made by critics is that the Queen's name and reputation became tied to controversies she neither sought nor welcomed. For a monarch whose defining characteristic was duty, supporters argue that this would have been especially painful. Queen Elizabeth spent decades avoiding public disputes, carefully maintaining political neutrality, and placing the institution above personal interests. That is why many commentators believe the events of her final years struck such a deep emotional chord among those closest to her. Perhaps the most emotional aspect of the recent reporting concerns the Queen's health. For much of her reign, Queen Elizabeth projected strength, stability, and resilience. Even during periods of personal hardship, she rarely allowed the public to see vulnerability. However, those close to the situation have suggested that her final years were significantly more challenging than many people realized at the time. Reports indicate that she faced increasing physical difficulties while continuing to fulfill her constitutional responsibilities. Royal commentators argue that this context is essential when evaluating the family conflicts that unfolded during those years. From their perspective, the issue is not merely what was said publicly, but when it was said. They believe that interviews, accusations, and public criticism became especially painful because they occurred while the Queen was reportedly dealing with serious health challenges behind the scenes. This is one reason why many royal supporters continue to view the period with such strong emotions. Emotions. They see a monarch who dedicated her entire life to service, while simultaneously facing family tensions that played out before a global audience. One question keeps surfacing in discussions surrounding these reports. Why are so many people speaking now? Some commentators believe the answer is relatively simple. They argue that many individuals who possessed knowledge of events were reluctant to speak while Queen Elizabeth was alive. Others may have felt that public opinion was not receptive to alternative interpretations of the story. Today, however, some royal analysts believe the media landscape has changed. They point to a growing willingness among journalists, biographers, and former insiders to discuss perspectives that received less attention in previous years. Whether this represents a genuine shift in public opinion or simply a new phase of the debate remains open to interpretation, but there is little doubt that more voices are entering the conversation. Interestingly, criticism is no longer directed solely at Meghan. For years, many commentators portrayed Harry as someone who had simply been influenced by others. Recently, however, some royal observers have begun challenging that interpretation. Their argument is that Harry made his own decisions and therefore bears responsibility for those choices. From this perspective, responsibility for the family breakdown cannot be assigned entirely to one person. Critics argue that Harry actively participated in actions that ultimately caused pain within the family. Whether viewers agree with that assessment or not, it reflects a growing trend among royal commentators who believe Harry's role deserves closer examination. Another major issue raised by commentators concerns the role of the media itself. Many critics argue that press coverage of royal controversies has often been inconsistent. They claim some narratives received extensive attention, while others were ignored or dismissed. Supporters of this view believe that public understanding of royal events has frequently been shaped by selective reporting. They argue that certain perspectives were amplified while others were minimized. Defenders of mainstream media, however, maintain that journalists simply reported the information available at the time. Regardless of which side one takes, the debate over media responsibility has become almost as significant as the royal story itself. Questions about bias, narrative control, and public perception continue to fuel passionate discussions online. For many observers, the battle over the story has become nearly as important as the story itself. When all of these claims are viewed together, a larger picture begins to emerge. For many royal supporters, this is ultimately a story about loyalty, duty, tradition, and family. They see Queen Elizabeth as a figure who devoted more than 70 years to serving her country and preserving the monarchy. As a result, any suggestion that she felt hurt, disappointed, or betrayed naturally generates strong reactions. Supporters of this perspective argue that the Queen consistently placed duty above personal feelings. They believe she worked tirelessly to protect the institution even during moments of personal difficulty. At the same time, supporters of Harry and
Meghan maintained that the couple faced challenges that should not be ignored. They argued that stepping away from royal life was necessary and that their experiences deserve consideration. This is precisely why the debate remains so intense years later. Both sides believe they are defending an important truth. Both sides point to evidence that supports their interpretation of events. As more accounts continue to emerge, the discussion shows no signs of disappearing. Instead, each new revelation appears to reopen old questions while creating entirely new ones. What did the Queen really think? How much did she know? How did she truly feel during those final years? And how will history ultimately judge the actions of everyone involved? These questions continue to captivate royal watchers around the world. What is becoming increasingly clear is that the story of Harry, Meghan, and the royal family is far from settled. New claims, new sources, and new interpretations continue to reshape public understanding of what may have happened behind palace walls. Whether these latest accounts ultimately change public opinion remains to be seen, but they have unquestionably reignited conversations about loyalty, trust, family relationships, and the extraordinary pressures that come with life inside the monarchy. As always, the full truth is likely more complicated than any single headline, interview, documentary, or book can capture. What do you think? Do these recent revelations change your perspective on the relationship between Harry, Meghan, and the late Queen? Or do you believe there is still much more to the story that has yet to emerge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.